everybody. Today I am going to, by special request, work on an Elsa project. So Disney princesses are one of those things that they're so beautiful and their hair flows so perfectly. And so trying to draw one and get it as perfect as Disney does is a struggle, but I'm going to walk you through some things that I do and then how I correct something if I didn't do it quite right. So I've got one copy that I have done before and I can tell that it's very Elsa-like, but it's not Elsa. And I went back and I looked at the proportions and I can see that I didn't quite get that right. So that looks like an Elsa who's probably like 10 years old instead of a grown-up Elsa because her face isn't long enough. So as I go through, I'm going to give you some tips on what to do to get your proportions right, because I truly feel like if you have the right techniques and the right steps to break it down, you could take any human Disney character and get it right. It might take you twice like it takes me, but you'll get it. So let's get started. We're going to be using a couple of supplies that I haven't used before, but they're really fun to work with. So I thought I'd show them off and you can see how to use them when you're doing a project like this. So what's nice is I am using a paper that has a tan coloring, and this is just drawing paper that you can find at the arts and crafts store. But because it's tan, it gives you like that medium tone for her skin. So it already starts you off with one of the values done when you start to paint it, which is kind of nice. The other thing that I'm going to be using today is not just colored pencil, but I'm going to be using watercolor pencils. And there's a lot of different brands out. I think I got this as a birthday present once. So if you've never tried watercolor pencils, they are really cool. I'll show you how to use them. But if you don't have these, you could do this same drawing with regular colored pencils and it would turn out beautifully. You could also add some watercolor to it after you're done, and that would enhance it as well. And then the last thing that I'm going to be using is something called gouache. Gouache is a type of paint that is like a watercolor that is opaque. You can't see through it. So when you're trying to add bright whites and you're doing a watercolor painting, whites can be tricky. And so gouache is a nice paint that you can water down to make it more transparent. You can apply it thick to make it bright white. It's just good stuff. You don't have to have a tube of gouache because in this type of drawing, you could probably also take a white gel pen, or you could take acrylic paint that's like thin craft paint and water it down and use it in the same way that I'm going to be using the gouache. So there's a couple of different mediums that you can use for this project. You can also just use colored pencil. You could use chalk pastel. That'd be really pretty. And you can just use watercolor. So let's get the basics down and then you can decide which medium you're going to color with. All right, let's talk about her face first, because remember I said that was kind of my tricky points. Like I knew that I got the face, the parts of the face right. The eyes looked good, the nose looked good. But when you put it all together, I was like, something's not quite Elsa about this. And so here's what I decided to do. I printed her out because I like, especially if I'm trying to copy a character, I like to take the character and draw some guidelines for myself. So I can see that her starting head is going to be an oval shape. So I'm just going to do a practice one here, and then I'll do one on the actual paper. All right, so it's not quite a circle. It's not quite an oval. It's whatever you want to call a hybrid in between a circle and an oval. It's a squishy oval. And so I start with that, and then I'm going to draw a line straight through the middle. Our picture of Elsa is kind of looking straight at us, so I know that she's going to have a vertical guideline there as well for where her nose and her eyes and her mouth all line up. All right, so I've got my grid line here. So then I look at this paper again and I go, whoa, those are some giant eyes. These are not human in real life eyes. These are Disney eyes. So Disney eyes are always much, much bigger And that just makes them more endearing and more heartfelt, and you can see their emotions a lot. So the eyes, or actually up to the eyebrows, divide the top part right in half. And I'm not using a ruler. This is just eyeballing it. All right, so I'm going to split that part in half. And then I'm going to look at the bottom half. Her nose sits right on the midway point between the middle line and the bottom of our squishy oval. So we're going to set her nose right there on that spot. And then we're going to add one more guideline, and that's going to be where the mouth is going to be. So I'm also going to look at this line and the bottom and put one more little line there, and that's where we're going to put her mouth. Okay, so let's get started. We are going to start with her nose, because the nose for Elsa is kind of simple. It's small, petite, you can barely see it. I start by gently drawing a little circle, and then I do my little C-shaped nostril on that side and a backward C-shaped nostril on the other side. And then I go and I put in the little nostrils there that are just like a little rainbow shape, and I connect them with a U shape for, there's some type of anatomical word for the little piece right there at the bottom of the nose, but I don't know it off the top of my head. All right, so we've got the nose done, and then the mouth is going to sit sort of right in the middle of this line. So I'm going to do the top lip above it, and she doesn't have she actually has quite small lips. So there's not much to her upper lip. It's just sort of a up and down, and then her lower lip is pretty skinny too. So depending on the characters, their lips are going to change, their nose, their eyes are going to change, but their eyes are typically always really oversized. So that's one thing you can count on. Okay, let's go up and create some more boxes to work within. All right, so I'm going to go to the edge of her nose and sort of do a little guideline that goes straight up on that side, and a guideline that goes straight up on that side. And then we're going to turn these into squares. All right, so it looks like Elsa's wearing a giant pair of sunglasses, but this will all make sense in just a moment. Okay, so inside these giant squares, we have not just her eye, but we also have her eyelid, the area above her eye, and then her eyebrow. So her eyebrow is at the top of this box. And she's got one that kind of curves up in the middle just a little bit, and then down the sides. And we can refine those when it comes time. And then I'm going to draw a line halfway through. And this part's going to be the eye, and this part's going to stay her eyelid area. So now we can kind of do the proportions right. So I'm going to do the top of her eye, and I'm going to start at the bottom corner and swing up and end at the top corner. I'm going to do that for both sides. And then the bottom does the same way. It's a little bit more squared off, which means it kind of pushes into the corner just a little bit more. The top of her eye is a little bit more almond shape, and the bottom has a little bit more of a circular curve. See how it's a little bit bigger on that side. Okay, and then we're going to add a little bit of an eyelid that's visible. So it's not quite a flat line, but it starts at the very edge and it works its way towards the center of the nose and stops. And then let's go ahead and put the eyeball in. So it's a perfect circle. This one touches the top and it barely touches the bottom. There's just a tiny bit of white that shows between the bottom of the eye and the iris. And this is one of those things that it's hard to get things identical. When we're not using a computer, we're using just our own eyes. So sometimes when I'm drawing, I turn my image upside down so that I can see, all right, did I get those irises the same size? Do I need to make any adjustments at this point? Because for some reason, when you turn your drawing upside down, you just look at them like shapes. You don't see them as eyes. And so it is easier for you to make those types of adjustments upside down than it is right side up. Okay, so seeing that, I would probably, when I do it on my piece of paper, I'm gonna make her nose a little bit bigger, but I think we've got the proportions right between the eyes and the nose, and that's what I was really working on, because if you go back to my original drawing, see, I don't have that space, and that's what makes her look like a little girl and not grown up. So we'll do it this way this time and see if it makes a difference. Okay, I'm going to switch to my piece of paper, and I'm going to use a gray watercolor pencil to draw with, but you can certainly draw with a regular pencil. I like the gray because it sort of blends into her skin and hair pretty easily. So I'm going to get started, and you can do the same. If you need to walk through the steps again, just go back and follow the steps that I did on this piece of paper, because that will help you. Okay, so now I have my eyes, my nose, and my mouth. And I'm going to start working on the jawline, the area that goes around the side of her face, curves around and back. So let me pull out my original photo here. And even though she's got some very nice cheeks that are nice and rosy, she does not have like a strong jawline. So really what I look at on a photo is how much space is there from the edge of where I can see her face in and her hair start all the way up to her eye. I also look at how much space is between the two eye sockets, and she has approximately the same width right here in between as she does within those squares that we drew the eyeballs. So you could fit a third eye in there, no problem, and that's what we're looking for. So she has a very thin spot between the edge of her face and her eye on that side, and even just slightly thinner on this side over here. So that gives me my two starting spots. I also like to go down and look at where I think I want her chin to be. So again, I'm looking at the space between her mouth and her chin. I'm going to put like a little guideline there. All right, so now all I have to do is do a smooth line, which is sometimes easier said than done, but we'll make a go of it. And we can always erase. Okay, we can certainly make adjustments as we go. So let's work a little bit on her hair. And before that, I'm going to put in her neck. It's pretty easy. It looks like it lines up with her pupils. I always look for guidelines. So watch what I'm going to do. You don't have to draw these guidelines. I'm doing it just so you can see where I'm figuring all this out. All right, so we've got her neck down like that. And now we can add her hair, which is kind of the fun part. Her hair starts almost halfway between the top of her eyebrows and the top of this sort of egg-shaped oval that we created. So it comes pretty low down on her forehead, but a lot of people make the mistake of when they're drawing people, they only give them this much hair. She has way more hair than that. So I'm actually going to start with the middle. It's going to look like I'm giving her a mohawk. But what I'm actually doing is looking at the shapes that her braid makes, and I'm kind of going to put it in sections. So let's start with her hairline. Her hairline comes down and then it sort of curves up on both sides. And then she's got some wispy bangs that are going to continue that way. All right, so here's the middle section of her braid. And then she's got another one that sort of goes this way, and they're curving off. This one comes a little bit farther down. This one is going to curve over her ear. She does have an ear in here. It's lined up with the bottom of her nose, and you can only see a little bit of it. Sorry, as I see things, I like to make adjustments along the way. So every once in a while, I'll jump back into the face and make a little correction here, correction there. Okay, so we've got sort of the beginning of this side, and it disappears behind her head. So I'm just going to curve it down that way. All right, let's continue on this side. She has another section here, and these will look a little bit more smooth once we start adding color and paint. But for now, it sort of lays it out for us. Okay, and then she's got another section that curves down, and then her ear, let's put in part of her ear that we can see. You can only see the earlobes because she's got hair that is kind of curving down. So I'll go ahead and put that sort of wispy in. And then she's got another wispy that's kind of coming down across her forehead. So I'll put that in. All right, let's just clean up a little bit, because sometimes all those guidelines can really start to mess with your design. Okay, she's looking nicer now. Okay, and she has, her braid kind of curves around, and you can see the bottom of it down here. So she's got a little bit down here and a little bit on this side as well. All right, let's put in her shoulders, because her big ponytail is going to be sitting behind her shoulders. So I'm going to continue these lines down, and they do a soft curve for where her shoulders start. This one's going to go this way. This one's going to go this way. And we're not going to put, I'm not going to continue and do like hands and all that stuff. I wanted to really focus on her face and her hair, because I feel like playing with her outfits and stuff is kind of a fun part that you can work on. All right, so I'm looking at where her armpits are to figure out how to do the bodice of her dress. So I think what's kind of funny is, like, when you draw a Disney princess this way and you don't have any of the color in yet, you could turn this one into Belle. You could turn this one into Ariel. I mean, the proportions are very similar for a lot of the princesses. So you can kind of play with that next if you want to. All right, let's do the pretty ponytail, because that's fun. All right, so her ponytail comes down just a little bit and curves off to the side. So instead of doing one shape, I like to say, all right, she's got sort of two layers of the ponytail. One that's a little bit shorter, and then one that is a lot longer. And I even like some of her hair to kind of go off in different directions, because I feel like that makes it look a little bit more realistic. All right, so we sort of have two shapes. We've got sort of a first section and then a second section that comes down. And I'm not going to draw, it's going to look like she's not wearing anything for a little while, because the nature of her dress is like there's no, it fades from the dress to her skin. That's what makes it so pretty. So I'm not going to draw like a hard line where her dress begins, because we want that design to be true to what it looks like on screen. Okay, let's talk about color a little bit. We are going to, I'm going to give myself some guidelines for the lips just a little bit more. I really didn't do that. But we're going to start with some darker colors and work our way lighter as we draw her. I gave her a little line on the edge of her lips that curves up. See, it just changed her from like being sad to being like, she's got a little bit of a smile there. And I think once we add like the teeth and we add the sparkle in her eye, she looks happier and happier. All right, let's get out our pencils. Remember, these can be regular colored pencils or you can use watercolor pencils like I'm using. It is up to you. And I'm going to start with purple. Now, I know that sounds like an odd decision, but her coloring is very cool toned. So like the shadows on her face have sort of a lavender color. She really doesn't have any warm peach. It goes from like lavender to a rose to a white. So we're gonna stay away from the peaches and really just be true to it. And if she ends up being a little bit like more pink and purpley, I think that's okay because she's, you know, a fantasy character. So I'm going to take my purple and I'm very lightly going to go along the outline for her face right here because there's a bit of a shadow. And then I'm going to go underneath her hair. And I'm just adding, I'm very lightly coloring it. All right, I'm also going to go above her eye where that eyelid is. I think I'm gonna go ahead and outline that eyelid. Remember, it just kind of goes in. This is Elsa before makeup. She doesn't have her big eyelashes yet. I'm just gonna put a little bit of purple across the top and around the outside corner and just a little bit here on the inside. So she doesn't have a strong bridge of her nose, like a strong shadow there. So we add the purples in to sort of create those shadows. Okay, she also has a little bit of purple coming down her chin here. And then right at the base of her chin, you can kind of see she's got a little bump, a little rounded area. A lot of us have sort of like a little bump right there at the base of our chin. I'm gonna put just a little shadow under her nose. This makes my art students freak out when I start putting like shadows on women. It makes them look a little bit like they have a mustache until we get it all blended in. But we're starting with the darkest areas first, remember. And then I'm gonna put just a little bit on this side. There's a lot less shadow on this side. There's much more light. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna outline these. I know they're eventually gonna be black, but I think it'll help us. Okay. Her nostrils are right at the base of those C shapes. Remember I did the circle and then the C on the left and right. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of purple where I think that her nose is her nostrils are gonna be. And then I'm going to continue this purple down sort of the left center of her neck. And sort of stop right where her collarbone goes. So a collarbone is a straight line. There's a little divot in between them at the top of the rib cage and then another straight line. So we'll go ahead and put those in. Okay, we've got our purple. Let's, I'm actually gonna go ahead and put a little purple inside the mouth. Her mouth is slightly open, so you can see just a little bit of darkness, and then we'll go back in and add in a little bit of teeth as well. And I keep picking it up and putting it back down. I'm going to do the outside rim of her eyes as well. And then one final thing is I want just a little bit of purple in the shadows of her hair. And so what I like to do when I'm drawing hair is see how I drew it in clumps first? Then I go back in and I draw sort of even smaller sections. And you know the shadows are going to be sort of closer to the hairline because once you get up here, it gets more light. And so it'll be a little bit brighter. So see how I'm just starting towards the hairline and kind of doing like some squiggles that go out. All right, not quite the Snow Queen. She's a purple princess at the moment. Let's start with a pink. So I've got a cotton candy looking pink here. And we're going to start adding some color to her face. So this is going to act like the second color around the shadows. So wherever I did purple, the next layer of color that I'm going to add as I move in towards the center of her face is the pink. So when I'm doing the pink, see how I'm using the side of my hand? I'm doing teeny tiny little circles as I'm doing this. So it just softly blends. And the pink is going to come up a little bit. See how we're starting to form like a cheekbone area? I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to go down the side and sort of work my way in. There's just a little bit of pink at the bottom, but this area is really sort of open. And she does have some pink on her nose. So I'm going to outline that little divot that's at the bottom, give her nostrils a little bit more definition with this pink as well. And then let me look at her eyes, maybe just a little bit right here on her eyes, sort of the insides of her eyelids. Okay, we'll come down and I'm going to layer some pink on top of that purple along her neck. And she's got a little bit of pink defining the edge of her right hand shoulder. Just a little bit on the left side. And that looks pretty good to me. Okay, we're going to go one shade lighter with the pink. So these pinks are kind of similar, but can you see how this pink is cooler than this pink? This pink almost has an orange to it. So the warmest part of Elsa is going to be this rosy pink color. It's not quite coral, but it's pretty close. And this is just for the apples of her cheeks. If you've ever applied blush, you know where the apples of your cheeks are. They're the roundest part of your cheeks. And so we're going to add that color there. We're going to add a little bit of this color to her nose. I'm going to add it into her mouth. We're going to make her mouth a little bit darker, but this will be a good start. And I think that's it for that rosy pink. Let's do magenta. She's got some pretty magenta looking lips. So this has got a bit more purple in it and it'll help us get her lips defined. And I'm looking to see if there's anywhere else. I guess I could put just a little line of it where her eyelids go to sort of enhance that makeup coloring. And now I'm just playing. I don't really need it anywhere else. I'm going to pick up my dark brown. Okay, so the dark brown is going to help me with a couple things. One, I can go ahead and work on the eyebrows. All right, so the eyebrows, I can start by just tracing the line that I drew, but I want them a little bit thicker. So I'm going to sort of do some eyebrow shaping. They're still really thin at the ends that's closest to the outside of her eyes, but the middle, you can thicken up the beginning of the eyebrow just a little bit. And I'm going to take my purple and blend in, add just a little bit of purple to those eyebrows because they're pretty dark. Okay, let's outline her top eyelid with brown, and I'm going to define that bottom lid as well. Her pupils are eventually going to be black, but sometimes I like to go ahead and start with a lighter color to make sure I like the shape. And then I'm going to take this brown and put a little bit inside her mouth because we've got teeth that we still need to add. And I'm going to extend, see how I extended that extended the brown to the outside corners to give her a little bit more of a smile. That helps a little bit with that brown. One more thing is I'm going to put just a little tiny curve inside her nostrils to darken those up. And maybe I'll put just a little bit sort of in this under area of her hair because, I mean, her hair is sort of silvery white, but she does have some darker areas. All right, these are starting to look good. And I can't stop sometimes. Can't help myself. Okay. All right. She needs some eyeballs. So I'm going to get out a couple of colors because her eyes are really kind of cool and beautiful and we don't want to mess those up. So I have a turquoise, I have a bright blue, and I'm going to grab my white. And I'm going to start by coloring the inside of her irises white. And the reason why I'm doing this is I want that blue to be sort of like a icy blue. And one, I don't have an icy blue color. But if I layer on white and then go over it with this icy blue, with this turquoise, I think the blending will get it looking the way I want it. Yeah, that's going to look good. And it'll blend even better when I add water. And then I'm taking my bright blue and I'm tracing over that purple that we already did for the outside of her iris. Oh, and now our eyes look kind of electric. I'm not going to add the black in yet. I know it looks a little funny right now, but I want the black to go on after we add the water, just because I don't want black to smear on our painting. Let's do a little bit of work on her dress. I didn't do a ton to her dress, but here's what I did. I started with a turquoise and I outlined sort of her bodice rib cage area and added some color that way. And then I'm going to outline her arm that's extending down this way. And then for the top, I'm going to very lightly put in some of this blue all the way across. And then bring it down a little bit. And I'll take my darker blue and add the tiniest bit of this darker blue to it as well. Just where there's going to be some shadows, I want it to be a little bit darker. All right, I think it's time to see what water does to the whole situation. So let's do that. We're going to start with a pretty small brush. All right, so I have a couple of different small brushes. This is probably like a number 8. This is a number 5 or 4. And then this is a teeny tiny one to get inside those eyes. So when I do watercolor pencils, I just sort of focus on one little section at a time. So I'm going to start with her face, her skin on her face. And I start on the edges, and I get the edges wet, and then I sort of pull it in towards the middle. So some of that coloring is just wet paper, but some of it, as you go over here, you can see how the pink and the purple are sort of blending together. All right, see how rosy that is now? And the purple just adds sort of a nice shadow to it. All right, and every once in a while you gotta clean your brush because you don't want the purple to go in places where the purple's not supposed to go. So I like using this tan paper because it gives you that middle value that I was telling you about. But you have to be careful with how much water you put on this because this is not watercolor paper. This is just regular drawing paper. So it can't handle quite as much water as a regular watercolor paper would. And I want to leave some of these areas pretty naked because I want that natural paper color to show through. So I'm going to go around her eyes, but I'm keeping kind of steering clear of her eyebrows because I don't want those eyebrow dark colors to compete with her sort of smooth skin. And if you have any harsh lines, you can always take clean water and sort of go on top of them. All right, I'm going to continue down the neck. And I know I want this shadow color to go all along here. So I'll do that first and then I will soften the areas that are supposed to be getting lighter. All right, let's do our dress. I'm going to jump all around here. All right, so again, you don't have to paint everything. I'm painting over the areas that I've drawn, but I'm leaving some areas the natural color of the paper. All right, still using the same brush. I'm just cleaning it off now that I'm done with the blue. And I'm going to go into her hair. Now this is going to make her hair look sort of purple, but remember we are going to add white to it. So again, I'm leaving some parts empty so that that natural paper color can come through. And when you do a painting and you know that you're going to be covering it up with something else so that only a little bit of this shows through, that's called the underpainting. So that's essentially what we're doing right now with the hair. Is this is the underpainting. It's going to be something else, but for right now, this will give us some nice good shadows within the hair once we put white on top of it. Okay, I see one area where the brown from the hair is trying to seep onto the neck. So I'm going to clean that up and I'm going to let this dry. Oh, I've got one more thing I could do before I let it dry. I'm going to take my tiny brush and I'm going to go inside the iris and get that light blue really glowing. There we go. Okay, now we can let it dry. And we're going to come back and add white and black to our painting to bring her to life. Elsa is all dry, so now I'm going to do kind of a second layer with some details, and I'm going to bring in the white paint into the mixture. So let me start with a turquoise. I'm going to put just a touch of turquoise in her hair. And I'm just going to put in some lines, sort of a little bit in each section of hair that we've drawn. Not that she has blue hair, but it just is going to give her hair dimension when we add the white paint to it. Putting a little bit more down here under her ears because that's a really shadowy area. Okay, and let's also add a little bit of, we need to add eyelashes. I'm going to start with purple and then I'm going to put a little bit of black on top. So I usually start right above where her pupil is in the center of her eye, go up to where her eyelid is, and the eyelashes on the right are going to be going out towards the right corner of your paper. And then I just sort of thicken up that outside line there. The eyelashes on the left are going to be going out towards the left corner of your paper. And I'm noticing something that's bothering me when I have to do, I have to fix it. I have to fix it. Her little earlobe had no color on it and it just looked empty. So I'm just gonna fix that while it's on my mind. Okay, earlobe fixed. Okay, so we did the purple around the eyes. We added some more dimension to her hair. Let's get our black. All right, I'm going to start by coloring in her pupils. She will no longer look quite as possessed as she did with empty pupils. Again, if you're having trouble getting those circles even, double check it. Flip it upside down and look at them. And then you can make a few corrections if you need to. Okay. All right, she has some pretty dark eyeliner going on, this lady does. She wears a lot of makeup, but we're going to make it look really nice. So I'm going to do kind of the similar thing I just did with the purple is I'm going to outline that top eyelid and bring it down just a little bit on the outside edge of her lower eyelid. And then just maybe a few little eyelashes in black along the top outer corners. And this is actually lined a little bit further down. There we go. She's a fairly dramatic lady. I'm going to put just a touch of black inside the mouth so that it darkens the inside there. And I think that's all the black that we need. I could, if I wanted to, you can decide if you want to do this or not, add a rim of black to her pupils. That's just going to make that light color pop even more because the outside edge is so dark. Alrighty, we are ready to add some white. Let's take a plate and put some white paint. Now remember I said you could use craft paint that's acrylic, or if you want to try gouache, you think it's going to be something that you could use, go ahead and give it a try and buy some. You can actually let gouache dry and then bring it back to life with water. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got a pile sitting here from earlier and I'm just going to add water to it and see how it starts mixing up again. So the first layer of white that we're going to do is a very liquidy blend of white and water because we want to do sort of a medium white layer and then a bright white layer. So let's go into her hair and we're going to add some chunks of white. So see how I defined the outside edge and then I went up and sort of added a few brush strokes in the middle. We're going to do that to each section. There's the outside edge, and then I'm going to pull it down. I don't want all this to be white towards her hairline because that should be a little bit darker in those areas. So I'm going to try to be careful about doing that. But let's see how watered down it, and as it dries, it's going to get even darker. So that's why we're going to do a couple of layers with this paint. Okay, so I just did the outside edge of that bottom piece because that's supposed to be dark and shadowy under there. I'm going around, adding my white. And it goes on pretty bright and then you can see it fade as it dries. When I have like a big piece of hair that's sort of coming out, it's like it's a loose piece, a lot of times I'll start at the tip and I'll work its way in so that tip is really thin. That's how I get a really thin strand of hair, is I start at the tip and I bring it in towards the center. Okay, let's keep going with her ponytail. Same thing, it's watered down. And you don't have to do every single piece. I wanted some of these pieces down here to be a little bit thicker, so I'm kind of going back in and thickening them up. Okay, so we've got her hair pretty good. Let's do a little bit to her dress. Her dress is going to have just sparkles. So what I'm doing is just taking the very tip of my paintbrush and tapping it right where that sort of watery blue edge is to her dress. And some of these may disappear as they dry just because it's so watered down, but we'll go back in with a second batch that's a little bit brighter. Just gets the ball rolling. Okay. Couple more things before we start going super duper white. One is, I'm going to turn my paper so I can really see what I'm doing. I'm going to take the tip of this paintbrush and I'm going to put just a little bit of white inside her smile because she does have a smile. She doesn't have her lips closed. So I'm going to let that dry just a little bit and then I might hit it again with a little bit brighter. Okay, I'm going to clean my paintbrush. And now we need to go more opaque. So what that means is you're going to mix more paint and less water to get a brighter white. And the first thing we're going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is switch to a smaller paintbrush. We're going to go inside the eye. So it's time to go smaller. So I'm going to take my teeny tiny paintbrush and I'm going to outline around the outside of her iris. I'm going to go all the way to the outside edge of her eye. And I'm going to leave this little empty spot there because everybody has sort of that little muscle in the corner of their eye, and that wouldn't be bright white. So I'm going to leave that empty. All right, so let me do the same thing. I'm going to turn the paper so I'm not rubbing my hands through what I just drew. All right, so I'm going to go around the iris. And fill up the outside edge of her eyeball here. See, that brought her a little bit more to life. I'm going to take the same bright paint and just put a little bit inside the teeth. I just do like the bottom edge, just a little stripe there. So that gives her teeth a little bit of a highlight. You don't want to go all the way across because not all of your teeth are going to catch the light, just sort of like the front too. All right, let's throw in some more little specks to her dress. I think this dress was my favorite outfit that she wore. She had some good costumes in the second movie. All right, so you can decide how white you want it to go. And then I have one more thing, and this is something that you have to do on any person or animal that you do, is you have to give them bright spots in their eyes because that's going to make them look like their eyeballs are wet and reflecting light. And so we're going to dip our tiniest paintbrush in some paint that's not watered down at all. And I'm going to put a dot right on the top edge of the pupil Think of it as a clock. It's not 12 o'clock. I'm going to put it in the 1 o'clock position. See? 1 o'clock. All right, you have to put it in the same spot on both eyes. Otherwise, it makes them look like their eyes are going in different directions. And that sort of brings her to life a little bit, I think. All right, you could keep playing with this. You could go back in and add some like super bright strands of white to her hair. I think I'll do that with a thicker paintbrush. But now it's just getting her looking the way that you want her. Her hair's a lot brighter on this side. I think the sun is kind of hitting her, the light's hitting her from this angle. Okay, I think she's looking great. So give her a try. And if it doesn't come out the first time, don't worry about it. Give it a second try, because I think each version that you do will have some things that you're like, well, I love this part and maybe I can tweak that part. Same thing happens to me all the time. I think I got the proportions of the face better. I like this one too though. So whatever you do, just keep trying. Do it more than once, because even an artist who paints and draws all the time sometimes has to do a second take on things. And I think you'll have fun in the process. So I hope you enjoy your time making Elsa, and I hope you try out some of the new watercolor pencils and gouache that I talked about, because I think they're really neat art tools. And have a great week. Bye, guys.